Soldier On acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia. We recognise their continuing connection to traditional lands and waters and would like to pay respect to their elders, both past and present. Soldier On would also like to acknowledge the unique nature of military service and the valuable contribution made by former and current defence members and their families to our nation. Thank you to Legacy House for generously providing the filming space for this episode. Content warning. The following episode may contain personal accounts of service, trauma, and mental health. Viewer discretion is advised. Welcome to Saluting Their Service, Contemporary Voices of Bravery. In this podcast, we interview and discuss the lives of some inspiring veterans to learn why they came to join the military, the story of their service, and their journey transitioning into civilian life. My name is Jason Isaac. I'm a Senior Program and Engagement Officer at Soldier On, and today I'm joined by Andrea McMahon. Thanks for joining us, Andrea.
Thank you very much for having me.
I'd like to ask you, what inspired you to join the military? And what was your life like before you enlisted?
So can I answer those the other way round?
You can, absolutely.
So life before I enlisted, I was part of a close and loving family. I grew up in Canberra and I grew up with parents who had who encouraged us and also nurtured us in a musical education as an extracurricular opportunity. So I felt I was really lucky in that particular circumstance. And as part of my growing up in Canberra, of course, we have the Royal Military College Band located there, and we used to go to a number of their concerts. My mum took me. I started learning piano when I was 7 and then started learning flute after that. And flute became my primary instrument, and so it would be a great thing to go and watch similar musicians. And so we used to go and watch the Royal Military College Band. Once a year, the RAF band from Melbourne used to come to Canberra as well, and the two bands would join together and do a big show they called Big Band Sound. And so my family always used to go and see those every year. And in my last year of high school was the whole circumstance of what am I going to do next? What am I going to do for life? And I knew that I didn't necessarily want to go to university, and I didn't have a burning desire to get a degree in anything. But music had been a really big thing in my life up to that point in time. I'd had the advantage of having a teacher when I was much younger on flute who instilled in me a complete love of the instrument, and he had a great way of imparting knowledge. So he really got me going on the flute, which was great. And I'd also then went and joined community bands, and I'd gone into playing community bands and saw just the social as well as educational value of being with a group of musicians, and I just loved it. So in that last year of school, having had some band experience already, my mum said to me, "Why don't you have a look at joining the army?" I was a bit bemused by that. That was not something necessarily. We weren't from a family that had a long tradition of the military. My grandfather had been a medic on the hospital ships during the First World War. But apart from that, we hadn't had a long family tradition of many generations of military people. So I was quite bemused when my mum asked me that question. But I thought, well, I'll follow the line, and I'll follow and see what it is that perhaps I might be able to do that. So we rang the Royal Military College Band, spoke to the gentleman at the time, there's a music director, asked what I needed to do, and it was to go and do an audition so that they could make sure that I was of the requisite ability and skill to go and join the army as a musician. So I went and did that, and I passed that. He decided that I was of the right standard to join the military. And so then the rest is history, really. I then went to recruiting, did all the testing that everybody does at recruiting, and then I attended RAC school in Sydney, which is where the women used to go, the female recruits used to go in those days. It was before they joined with the men at Kapuka.
And what's that? What RAC school? So
Yeah,
for
Women's Royal Australian Army Corps. Yeah, so the women used to have their own corps when I very first joined the Army. So they would be corps assigned, but they had their own corps. So I joined the Women's Royal Australian Army Corps.
So you went to do an audition before enlistment to see if you had the right skills to join, the band corps. Is that a normal process?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So the Army, the Defence Force actually, Navy and Air Force are exactly the same. You can't just join the Army or the Defence Force and say, oh, by the way, I'd like to be a musician. Way previous to my time joining, they used to have apprentices in the bands. And so you could join, you could show that you had some aptitude for music, and then you would join for 2 years and do a 2-year apprenticeship in music. But that stopped about the time that I was looking at joining the Army. So you had to join already with a certain amount of skill and ability. And of course, these days a lot of people are university degreed before they join as musicians in the Defence Force.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I mean, as you know, I joined the Army straight out of school also, but there was no audition for myself. No. It was, could I pass the aptitude, the physical, and it was a general enlistment. So the Army said, well, this is where we need you, and that's where you go. So I didn't do a corps enlistment, but it sounds very much like you do an audition because you are destined to head towards band corps.
That's exactly right. So unless you are considered to be of a requisite skill level, there's no point unless you decide you want to become something else within the military. So all of our musicians have had an audition prior to joining the Defence Force.
Yeah, well, that's something I've learnt today. Like in all my time of service and then transitioning out of service and then helping support veterans and families, you've taught me something new today. I believed that people would join. Yes, I understood that they would have to have a very special skill set to be able to, I guess, play those instruments. But I also had the belief that, along with your practice, but there would be that, development phases for anyone that maybe shared an interest in being a musician.
Yeah, well, I think all musicians are of the ilk that they want to continue to improve. I mean, I still learnt flute for a long time after I joined Army. I guess it's the musician's lot. They want to improve, they want to get better, and, play as part of an ensemble, and the ensemble gets better. It's all about continued development. And lots of my soldiers, when I got a little bit more senior, lots of my soldiers used to go and seek lessons, particularly if there were travelling people from international people coming into Australia. They would pay a lot of money to go and get a lesson and just kind of top up that skill and get a different slant on performance. And I think you never stop learning.
Yeah, and I think, we'll move into your service period, and, feel free to touch on this also. Not only just being a musician, but also being a serving member of the Australian Army. Is there some real defining moments from your experience and service life?
Probably one of the first ones, which is kind of humorous, I guess, in a way. I was the first woman to be in the band of the Royal Military College and the second woman to join our corps. So it was quite obvious when I was on parade. I wore a different uniform back in those days, very different colour to what the men did. When we were in concert, I wore exactly the same dress, but I'm not very tall in stature, so it's kind of fairly obvious, I guess, that I'm a woman, just short in stature. And I'd been in the band about 6 months, and we did the concert with the RAF band, the big band sound, and it was probably my first really big concert with the band about 6 months after I joined. And the band corps, like all of the corps in the Army, has its own corps song, and the Army band corps song is The Minstrel Boy, which a number of years ago somebody actually arranged for 4-part male vocal. And it sounds spectacular. It's unaccompanied, so it's just male voice, and it really is very stirring. And they decided to finish the concert with the Minstrel Boy, with the Army guys all singing this particular corps march. Has 2 verses. And we'd rehearsed it in the band room prior to the concert, and of course we always had our words. So I'd learnt the music, that was fine, and the music director said to us all, you need to learn the words to both verses. And I thought, oh, yep, no worries. Yeah, I think I've got it. And then on the evening, on the night of performance, I just kind of went blank. And I thought, oh, that's okay. I'll just kind of stand at the back. And I guess because I was the only girl in the band at the time, sometimes it was a bit of a novelty, really. It's like, oh, there's a girl in that band. And so the fellas in the band pushed me from the back right down to the front. And I'm front and centre in the middle of the band. I did not know the second verse to that. I just couldn't bring it to memory. And so, to be fair, I hadn't learnt it properly. That's the crux of it. So I stood there just thinking to myself, I am not fooling anybody that I don't know this song. So thankfully we had two more shows, and I went home after that night and thought that, I thought I must learn this so I do not fault on it in the next 2 performances. So I guess that was a really big defining moment for me, is don't ever be underprepared. And I think it kind of served me right, really. But that was not a good, it was a defining moment to never repeat, so that was a big lesson anyway. But I think another really defining moment for me was the first opportunity that somebody realised or considered that I had sort of musical leadership, but also leadership qualities such that they thought I was worthy of promotion. And that was a really big thing for me. Being promoted, you get kind of pretty excited about anybody that has enlisted, and I think their first promotion to Lance Corporal, it was for me, was very exciting, and it was kind of daunting. I realised that my superiors were going to start to expect a lot more from me, and that they were going to expect for me to make decisions that were both practical and workable.
Yes.
I also realised that my new peers and new subordinates, even though I was only a Lance Corporal at the time, they also were looking to me for direction and answers and problem-solving ability. So that was a big lesson. That was a really defining time, and taking on the responsibility of being the person that made decisions. And, at the level that you do as a Lance Corporal, you still have to make decisions. And as I became more senior, and I then in turn got to promote people in turn, I would always have a really good conversation with the people I'd promoted to Lance Corporal. And I would say to them, okay, you're on your way up now. You have been identified, and now I'm expecting you to make decisions. And I would say to them, for me, there are no wrong decisions. There are probably more appropriate decisions sometimes. But I said, if you don't make a decision, I'll get that will make me cross. If you make a decision, it's not necessarily the best decision. That's an opportunity for us to have a conversation. But I'd much rather you made decisions than just not. So I guess in my own career, that was a really defining moment for me. And then, of course, once I was commissioned, I then had a broader range of responsibilities and that same requirement to be making decisions, and relying on people who were experienced, relying on my senior non-commissioned officers and the experience base, relying on them to provide me with advice, and having the wisdom to sort, between the various different pieces of advice to seek which ones I would actually listen to and then utilise. So, that very initial promotion for me was a really defining moment.
So you spoke about, a defining moment from being promoted to Lance Corporal, and then further journey as you've gone through the promotion chain. What are the different roles or responsibilities within the band corps that your ranks and different promotions would ask of you?
Sure. It's along the way, it's a little bit, tiny bit, structured like the infantry. So you have a section leader, and within the band, you have the trumpet section and the trombone section and the flute section and the clarinet section. And each one of those has a leader. So there'll be a clarinet section leader and a flute section leader. So as corporal, you then undertook that role. And what that meant was that you were then responsible for the standard of your section and to rehearse that section. So in my case, I would have to rehearse the flute players. The clarinet section leader rehearsed the clarinets. That's at the corporal level. And at the sergeant level, you then become the group leader. So in the band, you have the brass group, which is your trumpets, trombones, tubas, French horns. And then you have the woodwind group, which is the flutes and clarinets and oboes and bassoons, saxophones. And so as the sergeant, you would rehearse that whole group. And you did that before the boss then came in and rehearsed the full band. So you rehearsed your little microcosm, then you rehearsed the next level up, and then the boss rehearsed the whole band. And running side by side with that is the fact that a lot of the bands they're not self-administered anymore, but they do a number of other things within the organisation. So, for instance, you'll have a couple of people that will act as the public relations cell, and you'll have a few people that will be responsible for organising transport. You'll have other people that do some admin roles, and they're hand in hand with, or in addition to, their musical responsibilities within the band. Yeah, so it's kind of this holistic organisation that look after lots of different aspects, not just the musical side of things.
Would you bring in, like you've touched on a point there that again, it's very significant to, I guess, people that are in the band corps, but you've got your administration workers, you've got your transport, you've got different roles that are played. But you mentioned also that they have also the musical ability, right? So you wouldn't bring anyone else in from outside of the band corps that doesn't have a musical ability to handle transport or administration or other tasks?
No, we were always certainly when I very first joined, we were completely self-administered. So we had our own quartermaster staff, and so they used to look after the stores and make sure all the band equipment was serviceable and able to be played. And we had the administrative fellows who used to do, they'd process all of the plethora of admin that happens in defence. So, we were completely self-administered, and they're not significantly different now.
And here's a question, it's probably more for me, but I mean, our listeners will really take value in this. But when you joined, were you required to bring your own instruments with you, or does the Army issue you instruments?
It's a good question. The Army definitely issues instruments. So everyone is issued with an instrument. When I very first joined, I have to say they probably weren't great standard, but the standard of instruments that they issue now are very good. When I was in my last year of high school, I bought my own flute. And at the time, I paid for my flute what most of my friends were paying for their first car. So it was quite a lot of money. And it's a beautiful instrument. I've still got it now, and it's a really beautiful instrument. And so all the way through my career, I actually played my own flute because it was a better standard than the one that the military gave me. But I also bought my own piccolo. Flute players play that on parade. But mine was a beautiful timber piccolo, and you can imagine being in the temperatures, my first band RMC for 5 years there, I did not dare take it out into, minus temperatures because the timber would have just cracked. So I always used to play the Army piccolo when I went on parade, and then play my own piccolo when we were indoors, and there was no harm of it, being harmed in any way. Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. Everybody has their own instrument is provided. A lot of people, probably the majority of people, will play their service provided instrument. But as I say, I just always found that my own flute, and I was used to my own flute as well. But it's a beautiful instrument, so I just took great joy in playing it.
Yeah, thank you. It sounds incredible. But you've had the luxury of bringing your own personal instrument and then also being issued with the Army's instruments as well. And I'm sure that, obviously they take good pride and care in all their instruments, as well as instilling, I guess, that sense of discipline and ownership within yourself as a musician.
Yes,
Would that be right?
absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And those instruments, if you pay a good amount of money for an instrument, it's going to last a long time. So, by giving people their own instrument, they take responsibility for it, absolutely, and that's the instrument that's your livelihood, essentially. That's what's earning you your career. So, of course, it's really important to take care of it. Yeah.
During recruit school, I remember I spent a lot of time polishing brass. Polishing my boots, polishing my brass. I could imagine that there was a lot of brass polishing within the band corps as well.
Well, interestingly enough, all the brass instruments are lacquered.
Right.
So you don't have to polish them. Yeah, it's very good. With the exception of the bugle, of course. That's always polished up for any bugle call that's sounded. So all the instruments, it was a bit of a cheat's way, really, wasn't it? It's a bit like having the, what do they call it, patent leather boots they have these days. There's no more polishing the boots, but so no, there was not a lot of, we used to have to polish up our uniforms, of course, any of the brass that was on our uniforms, but not the actual instruments, no.
You didn't consider going to get your brass pieces lacquered, for your uniform?
I think I did in the end. It took me a few years though. I was a bit of a slow learner, but I think I did in the end. Yep.
Yeah. It was. We used to have a brass helmet at 16 Platoon Bravo Company at Kapooka, and there was this brass helmet. And if anyone was ever caught not doing the right thing or not fast enough, not clean enough, they would have to polish it.
Well, we used to wear those old white helmets. Do you remember those? The pith helmets, the big white helmets?
Yes.
And they had a spike right on the top of them that looked brass. It was coated plastic. So sorry to, I'm sure everybody's so disappointed about that now. But yeah, it was just a painted plastic. Yeah. So we didn't even have to polish that.
I know that defence have changed in a few ways, and I know that there's, a lot of people that went to the patent leather boots.
Yes.
Some people would take them to a local provider to polish them up and pay them good money. But, I guess that was a time that, you took a bit of pride in, making good use of your time, but caring for your uniform, caring for your equipment. Let's talk a little bit more about your service. So, we've got an understanding that, your passion is music, you serve in the band corps, and, I'd like to have a chat a bit more about your service and, your length of time. There probably will be a transition point, and, we'll talk a bit more about your transition. But is there any sort of is there any insight into your service that you'd like to share a little bit more about?
I had long service. I had just short of 35 years in full time. And in that time, I started as a private soldier, as a musician rank, and then I proceeded through to sergeant. And at that time, I was asked if I would like to consider becoming an officer. So all of our officers in band corps are grown through the ranks. There are no direct entries. And so therefore, at the rank of sergeant, they said to me, would you like to attend the band officer course? And that was 2 years, 18 months worth of study at the Defence Force School of Music here in Melbourne. I initially said no. I didn't think it was really I didn't think I had the requisite leadership ability. I thought musically I was okay. So I kind of sat on that for a while, and eventually I decided that perhaps it was something I would like to explore. So I did. I went to, once again, I had to do an audition for that particular course as well, more to do with musical ability and oral ability, ear training, and we had to arrange music as well. So there were a few sort of tests that we had beforehand to see whether we had enough ability to go on the course. And then I was chosen to go on that course. So that was in 1992. I was a sergeant at the time. And I learnt conducting from this most spectacular conducting professor. His name was Robbie Rosen, and he was an Austrian fella and had come out to Australia via conducting, being the resident conductor at Covent Garden in London, which was the opera house.
Wow.
He had an amazing skill and so much to impart, and I just loved my time learning from Robbie. And I learnt from him for the 18 months and, of course, practiced that skill every day at the School of Music with the trainees that were there at the time. They were training to become musicians in the band and doing promotion courses and all that sort of thing. So that's what formed the band that we then trained with as new conductors. So that was really good fun. And then, of course, I was commissioned and sort of went through the ranks again up until I was chosen to be CEO of the Army Bands, which was essentially commanding officer of all the Army bands around Australia. So that was a real privilege, a real honour. And, I was really proud of that.
During your service, Andrea, was there any times that you were deployed overseas during operations as part of being in the band corps?
Yes, so I was privileged to take a band across to the Middle East in 2007. We took a small, I say a small, it was about a 14-piece band across to the Middle East, and we toured with the Angels. So Doc Neeson came with us and the Angels and a couple of comedians, and we did a number of concerts around the area. So we went into Iraq, and we were in Afghanistan as well. And so that was an extraordinary experience. I think it's an experience a lot of people that aren't in the Defence Force can't understand. You know, when I said I'd been really excited to have gone, people just kind of look at you because it's not, Afghanistan is not on everybody's holiday list. It's not very safe over there. So we took the band over, and when we went, we got into Tarancot, which is one of the bases, only 2 or 3 days after one of the fellows, there'd been a ramp ceremony for him. He'd died, and the ramp ceremony is when they load the coffin onto the plane and bring it back to Australia. So it's a very solemn occasion. And everyone in the camp, it would be fair to say there was just a general feeling of deep sadness. It's terrible when we lose any of our folk. So I had to go for a meeting with the commanding officer of the base, and he said to me, "You've got a big job. I want a big party." And he said, "I see your role as essentially drawing that line in the sand. Yes, we're all really sad that he's gone, but life needs to go on as well." And so he said to me, "I just want the biggest party you can give us." I said, "Okay, think we can do that." And I have to say, we set up, and that night we put on this show, which is kind of weird anyway, because you're literally in the middle of nowhere, in this kind of made-up army base in the middle of nowhere, and playing all this crazy music. And I've never seen so many people have such a great time without alcohol. It was, yeah. So that was a real privilege to have been there and to travel around that particular country and into Iraq and entertain troops was really fabulous.
And it would have been a really tough time because obviously, as you mentioned, we'd lost one of our own, and there was that sadness among the whole base. But your duty and responsibility to basically bring morale back
That's
up
right.
again was a crucial time. And it's good to hear that there was a lot of music and that there was a lot of happiness. Because, some would have gone, you know what, we're doing it for our mate.
Absolutely.
And others might have gone, you know what, this is time for me to grieve, whatever but it's a very valuable and powerful position that you have there.
Yes, it's something that I used to say to some of my musicians. They'd sort of just give me this, okay, the boss is going crazy again, look. But I used to say to them all, music is such an international language. It doesn't, it brings people together, and it's a point of celebration. It's a point of, the emotions that can come out when people listen to music. And great joy is one of those, is one of those emotions. And so to be able to bring music to people and meet them wherever they are in that situation is really a privilege, yeah.
Now, your story is interesting as well because you are still currently serving in the Australian Army, but can you share anything about maybe a transition phase that you may have gone through? We know that transition is hard, and sometimes people face a lot of challenges. Is there any sort of challenges that you may have faced in your transition, and what would that look like?
When I took promotion to Lieutenant Colonel, I knew that my time was limited. At the time, Army, the Career Management Agency, told me that I was not going to be offered a job in the broader Army, that as a specialist officer, I'd been recruited specifically for my musical skills. And at the time, I was advised that they wouldn't let me just have a job in the broader Army space. So essentially, I was made redundant. We don't call it that, but I was made redundant at age 52. I thought that was a bit young, but I did know, to be fair, I did know that as soon as I took promotion, my time was limited. When I thought I would prepare myself for separation, I realised that after almost 35 years service, I was well and truly institutionalised, and I figured that I might have a few challenges in separating from Army. I was used to people that you could rely on. I was used to people that would turn up on time to meetings. I was used to people that were well-dressed and well-groomed. I was used to people that if they told you they would do something, they'd stay true to their word. And I did figure that might not necessarily, that I might have to do a bit of argy-bargy, in Civvy Street, and that might not necessarily it might not turn out quite like that all the time. So I did a couple of things. I went and sought some time with a psychologist. And of course, we've got psychologists in the Army, and I went and spent some time with this gentleman and said, look, this is what I'm looking down the barrel of. I know that I'm going, but I want to kind of try and psychologically prepare myself for that. And so he and I had a number of sessions, which I found really helpful. And I also went to a course that Open Arms hold. It's a course that they run all the time. It's called Stepping Out. And it's all about the psychology of stepping out of defence, looking at the things that are important to us in defence, like all those things I spoke about before, the fact that we turn up on time in the right uniform, blah, blah, blah. And then our attitude to that, and then thinking about what it might look like to imagine those things not being quite so important to us anymore and letting that all go. And I found stepping out to be a very good thing for me. And in my current role as a welfare officer, I'm still dealing with people now who are separating from defence, some of them because they've reached compulsory retirement age, some of them because they're being medically separated, and some of them because they just choose for another career somewhere else. And I always advocate for people to go to Stepping Out. For me, it gave me 2 days of my life and it's run by psychologists, the course, and for me it was an opportunity to really look at what was important for me, how would that look in Civvy Street, and just how the whole transition could look for me. And it's just a couple of days where you can really reflect on what's important to you and how you might look at that going forward. So that was, I found even after 35 years, and even though I knew I was going, I still found that separation to be disconcerting. I just wasn't part of the team anymore. And And one of the big things for me was the realisation that all of my soldiers, that I'd had an influence in their postings, I'd had an influence in their careers, I'd had an influence in all sorts of aspects of their role and their life in the military. I was no longer that person. I wasn't relevant to them anymore. And that was a bit disconcerting and almost brutal, really, the realisation that you're not part of the club anymore. When I first stepped away from full-time, I didn't go straight into the reserve, so I thought I wanted to prove to myself that I could get a job outside of defence on my own merits. So I went and I drew on my training background within the Army and went and started training first aid for one of Australia's biggest first aid providers. And I did that for a number of months. And when I first stepped away from full-time service, I stepped right away. So I didn't engage on social media. I didn't want to see what the Army Band were really doing. I felt I needed to give the new CO, the new commanding officer, time to establish himself, and he didn't need the previous one breathing down his neck. So I stepped right away. I didn't go to the concerts for a while. And my sister at the time, she was the career manager for the Australian Army Band Corps. But I didn't even engage in conversation with her about, where's this person being posted and is that person being promoted? And I just stepped right away from it. And for me, that worked for me. And now I'm quite happy to look back into all the spectacular work that the Corps does, that the Australian Army Band does. They're doing some magnificent work now. They've always done magnificent work. But it's easier for me to look back on that now and be quite happy with the fact that I have no relevance to them. Yeah.
Yeah, that's incredible. We know that support structures and strategies play a really big part in people transitioning from defence. And you've mentioned some really valuable resources there. But you've also touched on something really important that really helped you personally, which was, stepping away, having some breathing space, allowing that time, I guess you could say, let the dust settle, allow the CO, the new CO, to be able to, impart with the team, but then also, feel comfortable that, you weren't tapping him on the shoulder all the time. But more to that too, it's about you having your own, I guess, I'll probably dare to say a bit of healing time, because when you become institutionalised and you spend your life in defence, it's everything to you. It's not, just a job that you go to. It is a lifestyle. So having that time for you to be able to, I guess, heal and find your own place and purpose in civilian life must have been really positive for you, because you've shared that. But I could also imagine that there would be days that you'd be going, I really just miss that. I really miss that camaraderie and those friends and the going to a concert, performing at a concert. Were there things that you were doing? You've mentioned first aid. You've mentioned, stepping into civvy life. Were there other things that kept you engaged with music or the passions that you loved about maybe service, but looking at it from the other side of the fence?
I'm still in defence, so I kind of feel at this point in time I've got 1 foot in, 1 foot out. So since I left full-time service, about a year later, I then was asked to do some jobs with the reserves. So I do that part-time still. I've got about another 7 weeks left to go, and then I'm going to hang up my boots for good, I've decided. So at the moment, I feel like I've got 1 foot in, 1 foot out. So I feel for me, except for that first initial hiccup, the transition out has been sort of long, and it's been I feel I've been doing a really worthwhile job as a welfare officer. So for me, that has been a very enjoyable and challenging at times as well, but a really enjoyable, and I feel I've been helping people, which is kind of at the core of what I like to do, I guess. it can be a pretty bumpy ride getting out of defence. It just depends on what the reason for you separating is. And that can be, for some people, that can be super pleasurable. And some people like me, I feel that their career was amazing. I'm very happy and very proud of my career. I had a great time, but that's not everybody's experience. And so if I can help people on their way out and try in some small way to make sure the very last bit of their service is feeling connected and feeling supported, then I think that's really important. And that's why I'm really passionate about the job I've got now. And I'm going to be sorry to leave it, but it's time for me to go on and do something else.
Yeah, and you do an amazing job as
Thank you.
welfare officer.
Thank you.
And we've had connection, and we've mutually supported members. Please share a little bit more about what that role entails to our listeners.
Sure. So back in 2017, the Chief of Army at the time decided that it was important for every unit throughout the Army to have a welfare officer. I took over the role of welfare officer in my particular unit, the one I'm at the moment, back in 2020. And the role is primarily assisting people for any welfare needs, primarily those that are going through the medical system. So you understand that if you get if you're injured in training or something like that, often you'll be medically downgraded just to allow you time to heal and get back on track. So if you break your leg, obviously you can't do everything that's required of you for a number of months until such time as that heals and you can get strength back in the limb and all that sort of thing. So I deal on a day-to-day basis with people that are medically downgraded. I convene welfare boards throughout the year, and they are to get together everybody that care holistically for that person. So we'll get the doctor in, we'll get the rehab consultant in, we'll get the physiotherapist in, perhaps the physical training instructors, we'll get their supervisor in, and the person themselves if they choose to come. And the commanding officer is the person that actually essentially convenes those boards. And I like to think of it as keeping everyone honest. So it's keeping the medical people honest to make sure that they are giving as much support as the person needs, but it's also keeping the person honest to make sure that they are engaging in their own rehabilitation as much as they should. So I do that, but more broadly, every day is different. It's what I love about defence. So sometimes I'll get to work and think, I'll be doing such and such today, and then a welfare case will come through my door and it just completely spins me around. So more recently, I've had somebody who was having trouble with their married quarter, blocked drains and all sorts of stuff. And this poor person had tried themselves a number of times to have the problem fixed, and a couple of the agencies weren't sort of playing really. So they'll come to me and say, have you got any contacts that, maybe we can escalate this? And it's like, sure, let me look into my little book. So it's having contacts and referring people out to organisations such as Soldier On, organisations like Open Arms. I can't tell you how many times, I'll send out to the headquarters notification that courses are coming up for Open Arms, or if I know somebody's about to separate, have you gone to a transition seminar? Have you gone, would you be interested in going to Stepping Out? Have a look at these courses that are available to you. And it's also liaising and keeping in contact with all the people that could help them. So some of those are within the military, some of them are without the military, but are really just plugging them into people that need assistance, and there's people that need family members recognised for special needs, and that might be because children are ill, or it might be because, a spouse has a particular need or whatever. So just really pointing people in the right direction in that case. Yeah, so I love it. It's really interesting, and hopefully I do a good job. I'm hoping I do a good job.
You do a great job.
Thank you.
And it's a really important role because it's, and I'm really glad to hear that, Defence have acknowledged that there is a need for a welfare officer because it is that conduit between not only receiving the support structures whilst you're currently serving, but it's also linking in with support structures, as you serve prior to your transition, if that's the pathway that it's going down. I was interested to hear about, your example of the person that had the blocked drains, because that was a little bit left of field for me. I've known you to manage people going through, they're bored.
Yes.
But that's another one. So it's a very important and unique conduit for our current serving members.
Yes, I agree wholeheartedly, and I'm really pleased that there is a network of welfare officers around Australia, and I think Army does a good job in that area. And it is really interesting, and it's important work. I've dealt with, sadly, I've dealt with a couple of widows. Their husbands died within service from illness. And one of them was a lady who didn't speak English very well. So, and it was during COVID when Melbourne was locked down so badly. So this poor lady couldn't, you've got a certain amount of time you can stay in the married quarter, the service residence, but after that you need to get out and find a house. Well, A, we were locked down, and B, they weren't opening any houses up. So, even just liaising with the housing providers and saying, look, this lady, she hasn't got the opportunity to go out. And so for months and months, I would just be writing letters and saying, can you please extend her a little bit longer? Please extend her. Of course they did. But it's all sorts of things like that. It's life's like a box of chocolates, isn't that what Forrest Gump said? That kind of feels like that's what my day is. It's a box of chocolates every day.
As you move on, when you hang up the boots in 7 weeks, we do know that having that camaraderie and connection to like-minded people is really important. Is there any connections that you have sort of outside of the barracks?
In all the postings I ever had, full-time, I always tried to get into the community wherever I was. In 2008, the very end of 2008, I joined the State Emergency Service in Sydney. And then when I came back to Melbourne in 2009, I transferred to one of the units here, and I'm in the Heidelberg unit now in Melbourne. And for me, one of the supports I've always had is trying to find a friends base that's outside the military. Because your military friends, they're great friends, but they're very transient. And so you might be there for a couple of years with them, and then likely they're posted over the other side of the country, And it doesn't mean you stop being friends with them, but you haven't got that daily contact. So I've always tried to get out into the community as well. So I've volunteered for the State Emergency Service. I'm involved with my local church as well. And I serve in all sorts of capacities there. We do a community meal once a month where people can come in that, need some support, can come in and have a good feed. And I have, certainly within my welfare role, started to engage more significantly with a lot of the ex-service organisations, such as yourself, Jason, and Open Arms, Legacy, the RSL, there are so many organisations out there that work with current serving and the veteran community. And I just think they're really important. I'm the same as you. It's comforting for me not to have to explain my history and for people to know my context. That's kind of somewhat comforting. And the civilian population don't understand generally what defence demands that are made on defence people. Sure, they see us wearing a uniform, but they don't necessarily have any understanding of some of the stuff that we have to do. And so for me, it's kind of comforting to be in a group of people that, although we might have had very different roles within defence, there's a lot of commonality. We've all gone through some kind of recruit training. We've all gone through some kind of initial employment training. We've all done promotion courses. And so we have that commonality, and not having to explain that context to necessarily, or walk into a room of people that understand that immediately, have some sort of empathy of it, is for me, it's quite comforting.
It is good to, hang out with like-minded people that, you don't have to dig into the nitty-gritty as to what your service was about, because people from service do get that. As you move forward into, you've mentioned the community work that you do, and also you mentioned, that defence people can be transient. So as you move into community, that can be, I guess, a stable environment. Defence community is transient. Do you believe that social media has helped that connection with people? Because I know that when I first joined, having a mobile phone was not even existent. Having social media was far from removed. So how has that helped connection over the years? Or
I certainly think it's given people the ability to stay in contact a lot more than in the past. Certainly for me, I'm on Facebook. I'm a friend of the Australian Army Band, so I take great, sort of privilege in seeing what they're up to, what they're doing, where they're travelling, some of the amazing things that they're doing, working in the Pacific and working all over the place. It's just amazing. So, I wouldn't have that if there wasn't, some social media presence there. I think it's really important for people who want to stay connected. Not everybody does, but for people that want to stay connected, social media is certainly a good outlet for that.
It's not for everyone, and others might find a lot more peace in being able to connect with people physically in their local community. And, there is lots of avenues to be able to continue to do that. Now, before we sort of close, I wanted to ask you what, with your experience, is there any advice that you would give to our listeners? Now, we do have current serving members listening. We have our fellow veterans and their families and regular community that may have never understood or had a service background. What's some advice that you would give to our listeners tuning in today?
Well, that's a big one. Okay, so I think I've covered the ex-service organisations already. And for me, my advice would be find your tribe. If you're not a part of the serving defence tribe anymore, then look for your next tribe. And that might be a state emergency service tribe, or it might be your soldier on tribe, or it might be your open arms tribe, or really trying. I mean, when you've left defence, one of the good things about that, I guess, is the fact that you're not going to be posted around every 2 or 3 years, and you can actually put roots into the community where you are. Maybe for some people that's not a great thing. I do sometimes wonder if I'm going to get tetchy after a few years when I haven't moved. But it gives you the opportunity to really put your roots down and get that other tribe, whatever that other tribe is for you, and really be getting into the community and making it another friendship base there, which can be daunting, but it can be also really exciting. Yeah, so it's go out and find that tribe. And if you're still current serving, I would say go to stepping out when you want to leave. When you're thinking of leaving, give it a crack, because it's a great course, and it may just help you get over some of those speed bumps.
Yeah, that's some great advice. I mean, I really love, finding your tribe because it gives you, I guess, that sense of purpose and meaning. It can be something that's quite sustainable as well, because tapping into, what you're passionate about, what interests you is really good. For me, it's fitness. I love anything to do with fitness, and I'll look for those opportunities. And I find that that brings me closer to, I guess, a service experience, especially when you're in a team environment, because in defence, everything's all about the team.
That's right.
And we do everything together. So I really like that. What's your next step? I mean, are you still going to continue playing your instruments? Will you connect in with a community band? What's your next step?
It's an interesting one, isn't it? I always said that having been in a life of professional music, that I wasn't sure that going into community bands would be my thing. But it is fun. It's really fun. And so I think I probably will do that. I'm just in the negotiations to buy myself a piano, which I'll have at home. Pianos are too hard to drag around on postings. You know, I did have one for a while and it just was too hard. And the poor old removalists, you know, you could see their face drop as soon as they walk through the door and see a piano. It's just too much. So I kind of, when I left Sydney, I left the piano there. But I really long for one again and just to be able to sit down and play. So I'll be getting one of those at some stage soon. And really for me, it's finding my next tribe, you know, and I want to do a lot of travel. I really love travel. So actually a couple of days after I leave, after I finish at the end of this year, I'm actually taking off on a trip. So I'm super excited for all of that, and I'm super excited to find the what's next for me. And having been so many years in defence, I feel really drawn to volunteering, and I'm feeling drawn to back to volunteer for the veteran community. So I reckon I'll be popping up in your porridge somewhere along the way, Jason. Yeah, and just really, I like volunteering. I like the idea of giving back. And of course, as you get older and you're freer with your time, that's the time to start really kind of getting into that space. And I do really like the idea of getting back into volunteering in the veteran space.
Yeah, it can be often very rewarding for many veterans to be able to continue serving, but outside of the uniform. I know that there is lots of veterans that volunteer in different capacities, and you know, we would welcome you with open arms, Andrea. You know, you're an incredible person.
Excuse the pun.
Excuse the pun. Andrea, thank you so much for sharing your incredible story and your experience with us today. We really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Jason. It's been such a pleasure. Thank you.
And to our listeners and viewers, thank you for tuning into this episode of Contemporary Voices of Bravery. This was the final episode of our podcast series. Thank you so much for joining us on this wonderful journey through the many lives of our veterans. This podcast is proudly presented by Soldier On. Soldier On is a not-for-profit veteran support organisation delivering a range of services to enable serving and ex-serving veterans and their families to thrive. Should today's podcast elicit any personal concern, a list of support services can be found in our show notes. Saluting Their Service, Contemporary Voices of Bravery is a production of Art Videography and Soldier On. The Saluting Their Service, Contemporary Voices of Bravery podcast was funded by the Department of Veterans Affairs. Thanks for listening.